Hi. So welcome. My name is Heather
Heather?
Bell. I'm one of the clinicians here at CNC360. This is my colleague, Jen Locke. She is another colleague at CNC360, and we're talking today about meal coaching because it's a relatively new service that is being offered. And as I was talking to a client about it the other day and wanting to get a sense of whether it might be for her, I realized that as I was discussing it, I'm not sure I was hitting all the high points of it. And so I wanted to come to Jen, who is the person at CNC who really does a lot of the meal coaching work, and wanted to ask her, who is meal coaching for and what have been some of her best experiences with meal coaching. So
Yeah,
thank you, Jen.
of course. Thanks for having me, Heather. Like Heather said, I am one of the main meal coach at CNC360, and I'm also a dietitian. And what's interesting is that when I'm doing meal coaching, I am still a dietitian, but I'm wearing my meal coaching hat. And that's one of the biggest things I like to convey to both clients and treatment teams is that while I do have all of my dietitian background, in that moment, I'm there to help support the client, coach the client through the meal, and be there in that way. And so I really like it from the perspective of I get to have this different role in a treatment team. I get to be a counselor and a dietitian, and then I have this other space where I get to be there in the moment with the client, help coaching them through the meal, helping to carry out maybe goals they're working on with their dietitian, with their treatment team. Maybe there's been something that's been getting in the way from following through with said goals. It's this very unique and what I found to be gratifying experience of being in these intimate moments with clients where they may be struggling the most.
I'm so glad you said that because actually in talking with this client, one of the barriers that came up for her is this sense of vulnerability.
Yes.
Because in discussing meal coaching and having somebody be with her during a meal and also be with her kind of in her home, because coaching has been in person now. In the pandemic it's been virtual, but nevertheless there is this sense of intimacy and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so you clarifying that you're coming in a role where, yes, you're a clinician,
Mhm.
but I think it's very different than perhaps what somebody might fear, which is you're coming in as a dietitian and you're saying,
Right.
"Oh, they did that wrong. Oh, they did that wrong." Not that we do that, but it's what people
Right.
worry about, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, please say more about that vulnerability and that intimacy and how you have navigated that with clients.
Absolutely. So, to kind of back up, what happens before we even get to the meal coaching involves really thorough assessments of, what folks are looking for, what their treatment team is looking for, and me being able to help carry that out and talk through with the client about how can I best support you. So before I even get into the home, when we could go into people's home, um, the client would go through an assessment with a therapist. Our kind of person that does our assessments is Natalie Gorenstein. So she'll do a thorough assessment with the client, with the treatment team to ensure that services are appropriate. Because one thing that meal coaching is not is a replacement for a higher level of care. It's an adjunct service, but it's not something that can replace having a treatment team. Because I am a dietitian, it doesn't mean I can be your meal coach and your dietitian. It doesn't mean that you need residential, so have meal support around the clock. So she does the assessment to make sure that the services are appropriate for the individual, that they're safe for the individual. And from there, she'll also collaborate with the treatment team and make sure everyone's on the same page. Before I even meet with a client to have a meal with them, we'll have like an introductory, right now it's, video call, but it would be an introductory meeting in person, ideally talking through, hey, this is what it really looks like. Like maybe you had the assessment, maybe you read about it online, maybe Natalie explained some of it to you, but let me talk you through my process. What does meal coaching actually look like? Some folks have this fear of, you're just going to talk to me about food the whole time, or you're just going to be this tattletale that just like tells my treatment team everything I'm doing wrong. And I like to be really transparent with folks. Like, if I'm concerned about something, if I'm planning on telling your treatment team something, I'll let you know too. I won't just be like, your
I'll let
client.
you know first.
Yes,
Like I will have
absolutely.
talked about this with you.
With you directly saying like, hey, do we think this is something that maybe you could talk to a dietitian about? hey, I'm actually going to mention, this thing that happened today. I think it's going to be really powerful coming from you too. But I'm giving you a heads up that it's something I'm concerned about and something that I might bring to your treatment team. But in that discussion, we'll talk about, hey, when you're struggling, what does that look like? Are there signs I should look out for? Like if you're really anxious, what does that look like for you? And if you are, what's the best way I can help support you? For some folks, they might be triggered if I offer something like, hey, let's do some deep breathing. For other folks, they're like, hey, Jen, if I'm really anxious, deep breathing is really helpful. So if you suggest that, that's something I'll do. With one of my clients, we started every single session with like this mini meditation that we did together, just to kind of take things down a notch. But it's really tailored to what works for the client. So it's important that I have these conversations with folks to find out, how I can best help them when they're struggling. If I notice something, what's the best way I can convey that? What's the most digestible, hearable way I could express a concern to them? And that's really important. Also talking through, all right, Jen, like I get it, you're going to be coaching me through the meal. I get it, you're going to be collaborating with my team, but what actually happens? And that's an important conversation too. So it might mean, before we start cooking together, we just kind of sit and have a chat and be like, okay, how you doing today? What's going on? What are we making for lunch today? Your dietitian mentioned that you were doing takeout, but I noticed that you don't have any takeout with you. What's happening there? Kind of just getting a pulse read on what's happening for the client in that moment and what we're planning to do together. Sometimes it's cooking, sometimes it's making a simple meal, sometimes it's maybe doing a challenge meal like takeout or something like that together. And then also finding out emotionally where they're at. If they are feeling anxious, do we want to put a number on that? What's that on a scale 1 to 10? Is there anything that we could do to take that down a notch? Is there anything that the client's aware of that could be a barrier for the meal we're about to cook together? With being virtual now, that does, make things a little bit more challenging. People's eating disorders might want to wiggle in and they might see a loophole of, if I angle my camera like this, Jen can't see what I'm doing. So I kind of put it out there really clearly and say like, hey, if I can't see something, I'm going to ask you to move your camera a bit. I might ask you to hover your phone over your plate a little bit longer so I can see what's happening there. I might ask you to take your laptop into your fridge with you so I can see what ingredient you're grabbing. So just kind of letting them know, if I'm concerned, I'm going to say something, but let's figure out how I can say it. And so after we kind of talk through some of those things, and we talk about what that kind of check-in is going to look like before the meal, we might also involve doing a little bit of an intuitive eating check-in, depending on where the client's at with their recovery, with their journey, depending on what they're working on with their dietitian. I always check in about this, like, hey, are you guys working on any level of intuitive eating assessment, hunger assessment? And the dietitian might say like, yes, this is what it's looking like, or no, but I wouldn't mind if you started talking to them about it. They're really not in touch with their hunger cues. That's something, maybe we'll start talking about. And what that might look like with the client is, hey, any sense of hunger right now? And they might say like, I haven't eaten in X many hours, Jen, but I'm not hungry at all. We say, okay, well, let's keep an eye on that during the meal. We might make intentions of things we want to focus on or not focus on during the meal. We might be bringing up any judgments that we're noticing. Like, I'm having this food, Jen, I haven't had it in years, and I'm really judging myself for having it again. And so
that's one of the things that, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but that's one of the things that I love is this opportunity in a more one-on-one setting for somebody to bring up their thoughts in real time. Because,
absolutely.
when you are, like sometimes when you're in a program and it's a group meal, people feel comfortable doing that, but sometimes they don't, either because they're feeling shy or they're worried that that would be button pushing for other clients. And so the ability in real time to say, I have to tell you, my heart is racing right now, or this is the thought that's coming up, or I am just like flooded with shame right now. And then to be able to work that through so that this isn't the same meal experience that they have over and over again. This one, they got to metabolize differently.
Absolutely. It's this different opportunity that the client has to make this different experience with the meal. Or sometimes it's, I have a really strong urge to avoid this, Jen. Like I notice that I might find myself trying to like getting lost in conversation, not focusing on what's happening with the
Yeah.
food. So the work might be more so like, let's make sure we're taking more frequent pauses and checking in on how you're doing if we know that that's something that happens for you. You know, sometimes it's a client, their intention is, I know that I tend to, you know, use a napkin a lot when I'm eating this certain food or I'm eating really tiny bites. I'm working on it, but if you notice it, could you let me know? Or if you notice I'm avoiding a certain food on my plate, can you let me know? Or I say to them, if I notice that, what's a way I could say that to you where we could actually have a conversation and not be in a moment where maybe a rebellious part comes out or a part that wants to avoid comes out? Like, how can we make it a, you know, real-time conversation about what's happening? So there's these elements. And then a lot of times clients ask, so Jen, does that mean we're going to be talking about food the entire time? Like this is hard enough as it is. And like what you're saying sounds like we're going to be talking about my feelings, the food, my judgments, the whole time that we're eating. And so that's an important part of the conversation too, where I explain like, yes, we are going to talk about those stuff. And there's going to be room for normal conversation too, because that is, I think, part of the work. Being able to eat with someone else, being able to maintain normal conversation. And I don't want it to just be an experience where they feel like they're being put on the spot. It's really important that it's also, you know, a place where they feel comfortable, because again, it is this really vulnerable thing that we're doing together. And that leads me to another part of what I explain to clients before we even start, which is, hey, I usually eat with you. Like some people wonder, like, are you just going to stare at me while I'm having food? Like, what is that? How is that supposed to be normal? I say, look, I will most often be eating with you. If for some reason I'm not, like, we'll talk about it. Like maybe I had to have a meal with another client that day or something, but more often than not, I'm going to be eating with you and we're going to try to make this a normal experience. When things are in person, you know, it might have been, you know, us discussing things that would be helpful if they were having a challenge meal. Like, hey, Jen, I'm having pizza for the first time in forever. It'd be really helpful if you ate it with me. Like, yeah, that's fine. We can totally do that. Let's order the pizza together. So really laying down that groundwork of what can we both expect from this is going to be so important before we dive into the actual work.
That is fantastic. And I love what you're stressing over and over again, which is that this is a collaborative experience, that
Yes.
with their permission, you may be talking to other members of the team about you know, sort of their hopes for meal coaching or what kind of opportunities they would like you to offer. But you always bring it back to the client and say, what do you want to create from this?
Mhm.
You know, and if there's a piece of this that you're trying to work on, how do you want me to
Right.
flag it for you, or how do you want us to be paying attention to that?
Mhm.
That you know that this really is a co-created experience.
Absolutely. And to go back to, I think one of your first questions you asked, Heather, that I somehow managed to not answer around like, you know, who is this potentially for? Where have I seen the most benefit? And it's really can be this like bridge service. A lot of the times where I've seen it be really helpful, a bridge to treatment. Sometimes it's helping try to stabilize clients before they get into that higher level of care that they're waiting for. Oftentimes it's a bridge after a higher level of care. Honestly, that's where the genesis of this whole program came from was a coworker and I, you know, we're working together and saw this pattern. We're working in a treatment facility of folks coming back after exiting that higher level of care, that it's this big adjustment to go from a 24-hour level of care setting to a partial. And it could be a really holding partial, it could be a really full day, and still to go from 24-hour level of care to maybe 5 hours, 5 days a week is such a transition and such an adjustment. You're going back into the place where maybe you engage with the most behaviors, or maybe you were the most anxious. And all of a sudden, you went from being in a supported environment to maybe one that doesn't feel that way, and you're just expected to be able to do it all. And I guess what we're saying is that, you know, we get it that it's hard. You know, what else can we do to help support you with this transition, to help support you back into this environment that may be the most triggering, that may be the most stressful? So I really see it as something that can be this adjunct service when someone is impartial, when they're an IOP, it may help give someone an opportunity to be more successful in outpatient treatment than they've been before. It may really help with that transition out of IOP to know that they don't just go to, oh, I'm just meeting with my treatment team, that they have this other person that they'll be sharing meals with, especially if they found, shared meals at treatment so helpful. And then to not have that, that becomes a really big adjustment and transition for folks. There's also this piece of information gathering that I think can be invaluable when it comes to the meal support, whether it's virtual or in person, where you might notice these in time, in the moment struggles that are happening with a client or with their family, or discussions that are happening at dinner tables that no one had any idea were happening, and being able to be there to support the client, to redirect conversation if needed, maybe figuring out, okay, that's what was getting in the way with this client following through with this goal. So it is this very unique experience and information gathering kind of moment, for me, for the treatment team, for the client.
So let's end with this. What is something that you've had fun with in the meal coaching
Oh,
experience?
that's a great question. So I've had a lot of fun cooking with clients. I think that
Yeah.
could be a blast, especially when there are things that clients have just like maybe they feel uncomfortable cooking, maybe they're scared of cooking, maybe there's something that's really scary about a certain recipe that they're making, and to be there with them during something like this, or watch them discover something that they enjoy, whether it's the eating experience or the cooking experience. I found that to be incredibly gratifying. I think a lot of times it's being able to look back and see all of the work that we've done together, and being able to really take that in and like, wow, I remember the first meal we had together. And like, we'll talk about that too, especially when from, wrapping up with a client, like, hey, remember that first meal that we went out to together, and like what happened? And like, oh my goodness, let's reflect on this progress that you've made. And being able to see it in real time, clients making this progress, again, it's this really gratifying experience for me. I get to watch clients and help clients work through recovery all the time, but there's something really special about being able to really see it. And helping clients when they're, maybe difficult family moments that happen at meals, and being able to work with that client, work with their family, and notice how the meal is maybe much more functional than it used to be, or maybe like being able to reflect on, wow, these triggering things that used to come up all the time in the meal just aren't anymore. And that's really cool to see. And I've also helped clients with grocery shopping. Like, it can be really, really unique what we're able to do when things are in person. But even the services I listed, that's just a starting place. Really, I encourage treatment teams, clients to be really creative about what they might be looking for when it comes to meal coaching and meal support services, because it really can be customized and tailored to what the client needs and what the treatment team would like to see for the client. That's
I
what's
love
most
it.
exciting, is that it's just
Yeah.
ever changing,
Yeah, that it really can be so many things that speak to what is most helpful in the moment.
Mhm.
And and that it really is about support and collaboration.
Yeah. Mhm.
Jen, thank you so much. This was fantastic, and I'm so glad I had a chance to remind myself what this is all about, so that I can talk about it more intelligently with other folks. And I'm just glad you're doing the work.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Heather. I'm glad to spread the good word about the work, because I really love doing it. So get in touch with us if you're looking for meal support services.
So what is it? Are we having folks get in touch via email, or are we having them call a phone number?
Great question, Heather. So if folks go on our website, they can find our meal support tab under services. And from there, you can find Natalie's contact information. So her email and her phone number is listed right there. However, if people are confused and they just want to go to the contact us part of the website, they are welcome to do that. It will find its way to the right hands. So don't worry. Another option is to reach out to me directly. If you have any questions about meal support services, if you'd like to find out more, you can feel free to email me at jlocke, that's JLOCKE, at CNC360.com.
And our website is www.cnc360.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, Heather.
Bye-bye.